in depth about the options and which routes we believe that the county should take. I will let you know that all three scenarios do include all of these. They do include the 3% increase for employees. They do include a 14.4% increase on health insurance. They do include the $70,000 of outside funding requests, the 7 sheriff vehicles, $1.9 million for the schools, $150,000 in contingency, $42,000 for the voting machine over a period of 3 years, $60,000 for a new compactor at the landfill. The $110,000 for the EMS Reserve Capital Fund is back in the budget after it was removed last year. The $180,000 increase to the Blue Ridge Jail, $165,000 for the EDA incentives, and the new positions approved previously by the board. Model A from Davenport is what we presented to you last week. This comes in at a 58-cent tax rate. This option is a combination of cash and finance. With this level, you can get pretty much everything that we had on the CIP list. Everything that you see in this box right here would be the cash option for this year for a total of $609,000. And like I said, between the cash model here and the financing option here, the option A option with Davenport will get you everything on the CIP at a rate of 58 cents. The downfall with this model, even though it gets you everything, at 58 cents, there is a higher peak in the financing option on outer years, and even if we go 58 cents this year with Model A, then you would still need to increase taxes in the future years to accommodate the peak in the financing options. And I hope I'm explaining all this right, and if not, Davenport will correct me when they get up here. Model B with Davenport is also a combination of finance and cash options. This will get us to a 55-cent tax rate this year. This takes away some of the capital options that were requested. You can see in this diagram where the cash option is, the strike-throughs are the items that will not be funded with this option. So with the cash option, we only get the comprehensive plan, the learning lane, and the library quiet room. The financing option also goes down with Model B, and we lose some of the items that we would be financing with Davenport off of option B. So we do lose the 2 fire trucks. Those would actually be put out until FY28 if we go this route. We lose an ambulance. Mr. Beam said that we could rebuild another one, so we push that out 1 more year. We lose the admin parking lot and the fire suppression. I will tell you with this one, even though it's a 55-cent tax rate this year, this also has a higher financing peak. So even if you approved a 55-cent tax rate this year under this option, we would still have to increase next year to accommodate for the peaks. So it's not really sustainable. Option C, this is also at 58 cents. This is another combination of cash and financing. With this option, we would be able to get more of the items on the CIP list with the cash option this year, and it kind of levels everything out. So with this option, we would be able to get more up front, and we would stay at a 58-cent tax rate for future years if we choose to go this route. The 58 cent would be sustainable for capital items in the upcoming years. We do lose some items. We would lose the disaster plan, fuel trailer, the courthouse security updates, ball field administration, utility body, and the ambulance, admin parking lot, and the fire suppression. But this does allow us to get the 2 fire trucks back in this year rather than pushing them out. Are there any questions about the 3 options? I know that was pretty much in a nutshell and quick.
Well,
what would you like to go back to?
I think, board, if it's okay with the rest of you, I'd like to hear from Davenport.
Okay.
And then we'll have discussion.
All right.
Can I have a quick question?
Yes.
So, $600,000 in revenue from the sales taxes, it's going to be less.
500,000, yes.
So how often do you get updates on that? And, I mean, that's a big hit just on revenues alone. I mean, I know we're behind on our audit from,
Yes.
so we don't know where we stand there. I mean, have you gotten an update? How often do you get updates on sales tax?
So we did just actually get the update today. The update came in at, I was projecting 4.6 on the sales tax revenue for FY '27. Their projection came in at 4.9. However, you got to remember that their projection came in at 5.1 last year, and of course, we're not receiving that this year. So my projections are $300,000 off from what we did receive today, but like I said, we didn't get what they had projected for this year as well. So I think we're comfortable with leaving my projection where it's at.
I just struggle with that, considering, the price of goods and everything go up. People are still having to buy the basic needs and things like that. You would think that sales tax is typically a number year over year that goes up incrementally. And
Yes,
to
sir.
have a drop in sales tax, to me, is somewhat baffling.
Yeah, and like I said, their projection last year was 5.1, so their projection also dropped this year to 4.9. So
Are we recovering tax from like Amazon or anything?
not yet, I don't believe, because they're not completed. So as far as the real estate, from my understanding, the Commission of Revenue doesn't even.
No. I'm saying if I buy something off Amazon. are we
That would be a question for Commissioner Revenue. I don't know that answer. I'm sorry.
That would be an interesting question to find out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause I
As
mean,
far as online, because it's a tremendous amount of online purchases.
absolutely it is.
Yeah, I would have to find that answer out. I know that she says she does not have the forms fill out for like their machinery and tools and anything like that yet. Those weren't due yet, so and since they're new, she doesn't have any projections that she can give me on that right now either.
Which we wouldn't capture that this calendar year anyway, would we?
Possibly this fiscal year, because from my understanding, they would be done by August, correct? So we, right? Yeah. So we would start seeing something in FY '27 from them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm getting myself mixed up, calendar versus fiscal. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
It just seems to me that, we have, of course, we have additional expense like always, but we really have a revenue problem. And the revenues are down substantially, and it's hard to justify that with me. And maybe it was just the way that it was done last year, but it would be hard to tell. I hope that it would be a windfall, but it's hard to say.
Well, I mean, if you look at the actual, like, local sales and use taxes, the actual in '25 was 4.5 million. It was budgeted at 5.1, which is $500,000. And you're projecting basically a $500,000 reduction, right? Am I reading that correctly?
You want to,
Sales and
you want
Local sales and use.
taxes?
Yes,
yeah.
I'm sorry, yes, I'm projecting $500,000 reduction in what was.
So it's
approved.
almost like it was over budgeted last year.
But like I said, that number did come from the state. We just didn't, it just
I
didn't work
gotcha.
out that way.
Yep. Also, if gas prices stay as high as they've gotten in the last few weeks and diesel is over $5 a gallon, I mean, that could create a situation that we would have to address, because I'm sure that has come down over the years. It's been lower the last couple of
Yes,
years.
correct.
But if it stays high, then that's going to create a huge problem for us.
And I do feel that I've been conservative with the revenues. So I don't feel that we should run into a huge problem. Like I said, especially with that sales and use tax, and it did come back in today from the state that they projected 4.9. So I'm comfortable with leaving my projection at the 4.6. So,
Tracy, if you don't mind, on this, so just use option C as an example, the pay-as-you-go. You're talking about the cash/finance, not kind of like a hybrid model, for lack of
yes,
better words.
yes.
So let's just speak hypothetically, if option C was chosen, that 1.2, would that be pulled from our unobligated general fund to be able to do that?
No, that's built into the budget. We're not
Oh,
pulling.
so
No,
all right,
we're not
okay,
pulling
okay.
we're not pulling anything from reserves in this budget.
All right, so all pay-as-you-go is budgeted for as well?
Correct. We're not
Cool.
pulling anything
All
from
right.
reserves to balance this budget.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, as long as we're here, I might as well ask you a question. So, on option C, the comprehensive plan at 260,000, weren't we gonna split that over 2 years?
We were, but when we were looking at option B, which was significantly less in a pay-as-you-go option as well as financing, we would have a lot of wiggle room in the first year of option B. And Davenport has suggested, even with option B, to adopt a 58-cent rate because we would need it in the future years. So with option B, we had a lot that we could stick to reserves to prepare for. So this takes option B and allows us to use that additional money that we would be putting away to pay up front. So since we had that money available, we just put all of comprehensive plan in year one.
I didn't follow you. So everything on this page is paid with cash.
Correct.
Okay.
We will not
So-
be financing what's on that page.
Right. So if we split that and only did 130,000 this year, right? Because they're going to bill you in increments anyway, right? That would allow us to either not spend that 130 or do some of these other things on the list.
How would that affect us in the future years with the way that y'all have projected us going out
I mean, if it's cash,
Yeah.
so yeah, you'd add 130 next year.
to the next year?
Okay, Mr. Cooch. Are you presenting? I guess?
Okay, great. This is. Okay, I'm Roland Cooch with Davenport and Company. Glad to be here today with my colleague Sam. You heard from him, I think it was in the March 17th meeting. I unfortunately couldn't be there at that time. Since that meeting, we have worked with county staff to look at, I think what you just heard from Tracy, the additional options with respect to the CIP funding. And I'd like to go through and discuss a little bit about how they work and what we came to in terms of our analysis. So a little bit of background, again, since the 17th meeting, whoops, sorry about that. Since the 17th meeting, we have, we've done some reworking analysis with the capital improvement items in there, looked at and tried to analyze what we could fund with respect to the different adjustments in the budget and the CIP. Looking at the initial sort of task there, we looked at a 55-cent tax rate. And in that 55-cent tax rate, what that would generate for the proposed budget in FY27. It was, I'm sorry, is that doing that by itself? Okay.
Something started working right. Technical difficulties.
Well, do you have the books in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, why don't we go for the books? Okay, is the backup there. So then on page 2, we then started with, okay, what would a 55-cent tax rate fund, what revenues would be built into the budget for that? And those revenues that would be built in roughly to fund capital. As we worked with staff here, that generated that 55 cents built in, based on the cuts and adjustments, built in about 2 pennies, or roughly about 831,000 on a recurring basis if we assumed that that 55-cent tax rate would be established. And that's what would be built into the budget going forward based on that. So what we did was we ran an analysis to try to see, okay, what are the capital requirements relative to that 55-cent recurring tax revenue? And that's on page 3. Okay, great. So what I'd like to do is then take us to page 3. And this page, what we're trying to demonstrate here is assuming that 55-cent tax rate builds in about 831,000 of tax revenues. You can see that yellow dotted line that goes across. We match that against the CIP expenditure plan with respect to what are the needs that we have to pay for each year. And you could see that beginning in FY27, we immediately can't fund a lot over that 831,000. We've got about 3.7 million of expenditures that are identified. The next year is 1.6. 2029, it goes up again. That's 4.5, largely because the fire trucks were programmed in that year based on this cash flow and the spending. And again, you could see fundamentally we have an imbalance between recurring revenues and capital expenditures. So what we did was, like the last time, we developed a combination of financing relative to each one of those capital expenditures that could be applied there. Used a 4-year term for short-term needs like police cars, amortizing them over 4 years because they're basically the useful life is that time. Looked at 7 years for longer-lived trucks and 15 years for fire engines. Typically, those are long-lived assets that are going to be around for a while. So we did that sort of concept and layered those financing approaches in and targeted some of those bigger ticket items that eclipse the 831,000 we have on this page in terms of revenues. On the next page, if you would, focus on the left-hand side. That graph on the left-hand side in the bottom corner is really looking at what we're financing. Of those capital expenditures you saw on the previous page in green, what of those numbers are we converting to debt financing and what are we leaving in cash? So you can see on the left-hand side, that graph mimics identically what you saw on the previous page. The components of the bars that are still left in dark green, that's our pay-as-you-go cash item. The components that you see in various shades of blue are elements of financing. We're going to use debt to finance those elements that eclipse above our 831,000. So we wanted to test and see, could we kind of work in a financing structure and finance this plan of spending and fit it within 831,000 in terms of recurring revenues? Can we make those debt service payments work with our pay-as-you-go? And if you look at the right-hand side of the page, the answer to that is no, it's still insufficient on a recurring basis. We can do it for the first year in FY27, so we can make all that work for FY27. But in the next year, you'll see those bars, even those debt service payments, now we've got to make the payments on those loans, those bars are going to eclipse the 831,000 that's built into the budget. What we have there is basically an unsustainable kind of CIP, and even with the financing, we couldn't make it sustainable, given the revenue stream of approximately 2 pennies or 830,000. So the next step that we did on the next page is we took those cash flows, and these are the cash flows that are identical to the graph you just saw on the right-hand side. We converted some of the pay-as-you-go to debt service, and we left some of that pay-as-you-go there to help fund the balance of the CIP over the 5-year time frame. And we essentially calculated that it would take roughly another 3 pennies to get the CIP in a sustainable approach over this 5-year time frame. What that means then is if we make 2027 work at 55 cents, immediately then we're looking at a bump up roughly to approximately 58 pennies in the following year to fund the CIP as it stands today in terms of that. So we're calculating what would be a sustainable approach to get this done. That in our model and what we've done with our analysis says that 2 pennies in terms of built into the budget, dedicated revenues towards CIP, really should be at about a 5 penny level. It really should be from, instead of a 55 cent tax rate building in 2 pennies for CIP, we should have a 58 penny tax rate building in 5 pennies for CIP. That allows us to get this capital funded on a recurring basis. That's what the modeling and the analysis is showing. That also accommodates roughly all the CIP that you see here and allows us to rebalance out some of the pay-as-you-go with putting a little bit more of that up front, but also allowing us to accelerate the ordering and the financing of those fire engines a couple years sooner, because we know that those are kind of very much needed essential items. Waiting a few years would allow us, doing the 58 pennies on a sustainable basis would allow us not to have to wait, and we can accelerate those to the 27 timeframe. We did look at what would happen then if the fire trucks are extended out a little bit within this time frame. We're still going to build up to approximately 58 pennies, because if we push those back, those fire trucks then become a financing need at that time. They're just that expensive. So even if we push them back a little bit, what would happen is that we'd still have to build up to 58. It just kind of pushes it out a year or so. So the sustainable math in terms of making the CIP work is roughly that 58 pennies built into the budget for CIP. So looking at, again, how does this work? The same graph concept. We look at the left-hand side of the page, like to show you the expenditures versus the relative funding sources and recurring revenues. You could see that the difference between this table and the previous table that we had a couple of pages ago is we've moved a little bit more up front to 2027. And we also have that $2 million roughly recurring revenue stream that allows us to fund pay-as-you-go items as well as accelerate the financing of the fire trucks to FY27. The reason why on the left-hand side that 2029 is so low is we moved the fire trucks from 2029 into FY27 and built that into an overall financing plan that fits within the recurring revenue. So when you look at the right-hand side of the graph, that graph now converts those capital expenditures to pay-as-you-go as well as a combination of financing. And you can see that we have more pay-as-you-go built into the budget, and that's a recurring capital items there. But we also have the elements of financing that are layered on top, and all of them fit within roughly those 5 pennies built in for capital on a recurring basis. So this is a sustainable approach, doesn't lead to any sort of surprises down the road over this time frame, and it really allows you to fund that CIP, fully on this over this horizon. So our conclusion as we looked at this, looking at the CIP as we've been given, as we've reworked since the last meeting, a 58-cent tax rate is estimated to provide roughly about $2 million, almost $2,050,000 on a recurring basis that can be used to fund those capital expenditures that have been identified. It builds in a combination of debt as well as cash pay-as-you-go. As we saw on the graph on the previous page, we still have that balanced out. So we're not totally leveraging everything from day one. We've got flexibility to move around some cash and pay-as-you-go within that time frame. And as we have done so in the past, specifically most recently the landfill financing, we can accomplish this through direct bank loan solicitation that can customize this specifically for the county at that time. We decided to go forward with this, should decide to go forward with this. Also, these debt-funded projects, I know we kind of touched on this, but we can combine this with a targeted restructuring if we needed of other debt that can help moderate future budget impacts with respect to operating expenditures and debt service going forward. So that's a different issue, but we wanted to say we can combine everything together in one comprehensive financing, if so desired by the board.
Thank you, Mr. Cooch. Boards, any questions for Mr. Cooch?
I've got a couple, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Cooch, on this, I think when Mr. Stewart, am I remember correctly? Here last time, there was some discussion about what our structured debt service is currently. And there's some concern based on this financing model, how this kind of restricts us at least until 2032. Is there any other, because from what I remember, our debt service drops off fairly considerably in 2032, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
But for this next 5-year period of time, in the event something happens and we need to borrow money for something, can you provide any feedback on kind of our position on that?
We can, what, as I sort of alluded to, and I think Mr. Stewart alluded to last time, is that there are ways to rework some of the debt between now and 2032 that could provide some potential cash flow relief while not causing a problem beyond that. We think there's ways to it's a little bit of a reworking in the next 4 years into maybe 4 years after that, but it's not going to cause any spikes. What it would do is kind of level it off or maybe decrease it a little bit. So there's opportunities to kind of rework that, build you some flexibility in, and provide for those unforeseen circumstances if we need to, or additional projects. What we're talking about here is separate from that. This debt is built into the concept that we have those 5 pennies dedicated towards CIP. And if those CIP needs are built in here onto this plan, this one fully funds itself and fully funds the CIP side.
Do you have additional questions?
No, I'm thinking.
Ms. Tucker? Ms. Campbell? Mr. Pugh? All right, thank you, Mr. Cooch.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bryant? What do you need from us?
Ms. Martin, we're looking for the board to direct us. Of course, tonight, we're setting our tax rate, or having our public hearing to set the tax rate, so we know what to advertise. So staff needs direction from the board on what you want funded in this budget, and then later tonight, we need to know the tax rate so we can begin advertising it for the newspaper. We'll advertise on April the 2nd and April the 9th in preparation for an April 21st public hearing for the budget, the CIP and the school budget, and then we have an adoption date of May the 5th. So what staff needs is for you to direct us on what you want in the budget, and then later tonight, the tax rate you would like for us to advertise.
Well, what we want in the budget determines the tax rate.
Correct. Yes, sir.
The boys, what's your thoughts? Because what I do not want to see happen is we get into the 7 PM meeting and we come up with a tax rate that's not sustainable, and then that throws everything to the winds. So if we're going to have the discussion, let's have it now.
Mr. Chairman, to me, option C is the obvious one. It is sustainable. We don't have to go back next year and raise taxes. So to me, it's sustainable for a number of reasons. But since this is a workshop, and I understand everything you say, that when we go and talk to the public, we need to have our decisions made. We got in this position because we went 6 years before we did assessments. And we have talked a lot about changing that. And I think that we need to be able to deliver some type of message to our citizens about why we're not going to find ourselves in that situation again, because we're going to do X differently than we have before. If we are going to do X differently, then don't we have to also consider the cost of that and put that into this budget now and going forward?
It's a very good question. I think we need to determine how we're going to do that. I mean, in the past, there were talks about whether we were going to try and hire a staff in-house or if we were going to do it external again, none of which has been decided, and I'm not sure staff is prepared to give us that information, are you? Not today. No. So I did have a question, I guess, for Ms. Morgan and Mr. Cooch. Ms. Morgan, come on. So maybe between the two of you. So option C, which I agree is probably the best way to go. The 2 fire trucks at 3.2, help me understand. So what's important on that is to if the county's gonna proceed with that, the county would need to sign the contract on it. All right, so let's say we sign the contract July 1. That locks the prices in. But the trucks won't be delivered for 3 to 4 years, right? So there's a couple of options. If you pay up front, like what is being proposed with this, I think the county would save about $200,000, right? So what would happen if we signed the contract but didn't borrow the money until 3 years from now, right? What is the difference on the debt payment versus taking that 3.2 and just putting it in an account and letting it bear interest for 3 to 4 years? I know that's, a lot of things depend on that, but if you don't need them, if you don't absolutely need the 3.2 right now, you really don't need it for 3 or 4 years, why borrow the money now?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think part of that, and I'm not, Mr. Bean can chime in, but I think part of that is because of that financing plan with the third party, correct, Chief?
I think with this, the financing would be.
This would be totally separate from that,
Oh, so we would not go that route.
right?
I think the plan is.
Exactly. The financing here, if I can answer, there's a lot to those questions, but there's a lot sort of nuances to that as well. Notwithstanding sort of the contracting side of it and having the funds for it. But let's assume that you do that without knowing the other financing mechanism, and if you defer payments on that, they're going to build in interest into that loan. Let's say if you did something separately from us in terms of that. That will be built into that loan. Once you start paying, that accrued interest will be built into those payments in year 3 or year 4.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is,
Right.
if we signed a contract today with fire manufacturer
Right.
X, all right? And the build schedule is 3 to 4 years out. So if we, what is this, 26? They wouldn't be delivered until 2030.
Right, right.
Right? But per the contract, the price is locked.
That's right.
So what are we saving? I'm basically asking you what the debt service is on $3.2 million for 4 years.
It would be the interest cost. It depends on how we structure it. We have this exact same issue with some other clients as well who ordered long lead time trucks. They chose to finance their trucks, the other clients, went ahead and financed their trucks. They they kept the money in themselves to kind of escrow the money. So the money kind of covered the cost of funds over those 3 to 4 years. But they went ahead and started paying on it. That's sort of an option that they chose. The thing is, if we delayed financing for 3 or 4 years, we would still be in the same position overall, cash flow, but it's 3 or 4 years from now, we'd have to be at that 58-cent level. So we're not really avoiding the 58 cents. We're just kind of pushing it out 3 or 4 years if we delayed the financing. The other side of that is, if we delayed the financing for 3 or 4 years, interest rates may not be the same. They could be higher, they could be lower. So now we're sort of in this game, in this sort of risk of what is going to be our cost of funds at that point in time.
Gotcha.
So all things being equal, if interest rates are the same, your financing payments will be the same. You're just incurring interest expense over the first 3 or 4 years until you get those trucks. Now, if we escrow the money, more than likely the financing mechanism will keep the money in escrow, won't deliver that money until we get the trucks delivered. That's sort of the prudent way, right? We're not going to pay for that and give them the money until we get the trucks. We're going to be able to earn interest on those funds over this time frame that will effectively cover the cost of that borrowing over that time frame. So it's kind of a net wash in terms of cash flow.
Thank you very much. Ms. Morgan, thank you.
I think the other factor in the 2 fire truck equation is that 3.2 number, in my opinion, is heavy. So I don't, based on where the market is now, I think,
Yes, sir. They could come in a little bit less. We were, following Ms. Morgan's theory,
I
trying to be
yeah, I understand,
conservative and
but-
stuff, we didn't want to, so we were a little bit conservative, but I don't know that we're off 10% or anything, but yeah, we were a little conservative,
Okay.
based on what they manufacturers have said, so. Any more questions? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chief.
But Tom, I think your question poses, I mean, this is the part that I'm having a hard time processing through because ordering with a 4-year delivery time, we're not facing that with any other CIP project that we're dealing with. And there's multiple factors that play into this. As you well know, if you do this and the prepayment discounts versus holding that cash and us earning the interest, I think it's valid questions. And I understand where Mr. Cooch is coming from, but I don't know. I think we're basically gambling either way we go. As far as which way, and I don't mean that in a negative context, as far as which way it's gonna benefit us, we really,
Well, I mean, I think the point on the fire trucks, like you said, it is a long lead time.
Right.
Unfortunately. And, you know, the longer we defer getting them under contract, the longer the delivery goes.
I agree.
All right, and the more the price.
But we can get them under contract without paying.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
But, so, that's what I was asking, but from what Mr. Cooch, the way I understood it is, it doesn't change the 58-cent thing, right? So the question is, do you prepay and let the manufacturer gain interest on that money? Or do we borrow the money and put it in an account and let it bear interest for us? Because if you prepay, there's about a $200,000 savings. If you invested that money over 3 to 4 years, would we get that much back in return? That's the true question.
All right, so let me throw another hypothetical out, Mr. Cooch. Let's just say for some reason, Amherst County, we just hit the windfall on some economic development project, just as a hypothetical. Are these loans structured to where if we are able to pay a substantial amount toward this, how could that benefit us, or would it?
Yeah, typically in these bank loans, they have more flexible prepayments that you could either prepay them after a certain period of time, pretty much without any penalty, or you can pay them really early, which have a slight penalty. But usually that's declining and goes away. We've seen that in the market, that these allow for flexible repayment of provisions like that. Say if you come into a windfall 3 or 4 years down the road,
Right.
and you've got some cash, a couple $1 million, $3 or $4 million that you want to get rid of this debt and extinguish it, you can make that kind of prepayment typically. Back, Mr. Martin, to your question, if you're investing those funds, and let's say we have a 4% cost of funds on this, typically you can earn under tax law up to 4%, so you can cover your cost of funds on that. If we're looking at I'm just running 3.2 million, if interest rates are 4%, that's 130,000 a year roughly. And if we have a 4-year lead time, that's $512,000.
So we'd be making more investing it than.
You'd make more, you'd cover your cost of funds, but you'd make more to cover your cost of funds.
That's
You're-
what makes sense
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like any of the options because they're all a huge tax increase on our taxpayers. And, but, you know, either way you go, I like the 55 cent because at least it is a reprieve for a year on the citizens of the county. At this point, I don't think we can sit up here and make big changes to this tonight and expect to have a tax rate to advertise at our next meeting. I mean, it's beyond that point, I think. And as far as the assessment goes, you know, we would have been in trouble either way you look at it because we had a 14% increase on the insurance and we're building 1.5 million or whatever it is into the capital needs and 1.9 additional for the schools and the 3% raises. So we'd have been looking at this regardless of the reassessment or not. But if I had to choose my poison, I guess I would choose the 55 cent at this point.
Understood. Anyone else? I guess what I would say is I've sat here, this being my 6th year, and I remember the graphs staff used to provide where you had our revenues and our expenditures, and they crossed.
Yep.
Right? And guess what? We're there.
Yep, we're there.
All right, and we did everything we could do for 6 years that I've been on this board to not have to be where we are today. And personally, I don't want to be back here next year debating raising taxes again. So it's going up on everybody. I calculated mine on the way over here and I didn't like it, but, we already started in the hole. Our schools have needs. We need to maintain a good workforce and stay competitive. I've already talked to the county administrator about that they should be starting right now about looking for ways to reduce those insurance costs, all right? So when I first went into this, I don't want to be here either, but, I think the option C is the way that we're going to need to go. And if not, I asked you at the first work session, what do we want to cut? And nobody came up with any suggestions. And everybody that's contacted me about this, I asked them, well, what would you like to cut? And they have no opinions, right? So the lines have crossed.
I'd have to agree with you, and most of you understand where you come from, and I tell everybody, I was here in '08 when the economy tanked, and I thought that budget year was tough. But I think this one takes the cake. But I'm with Mr. Martin. I would rather take the pain now instead of coming back next year and telling our citizens, hey, we got to raise your taxes again, where we could potentially, and we've got 12 months to work and hope for positive changes in our revenue and potentially look at a decrease next year versus increase. So I think we can spend this thing in multiple directions, but I would hate to think next year we had to come back based on Mr. Kuchar's and Ms. Morgan's analysis of this, and we look at having to increase another 3 pennies. I don't think that would bode well for anyone, and especially our citizens.
Okay. Is that enough direction?
Do I have 3 board members saying that?
Sounds like it.
I'm a yes.
Ms. Campbell, yes or no?
For what?
58 cent.
No.
Mr. Pugh? No. Mr. Adams?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Do you need that in a motion? Or just that?
It would help. Mr. Popovich is saying yes.
Is there a motion to that effect?
Mr. Chairman, just for a second, let's divert to the schools for just a minute.
Okay.
What if, so they presented 2 scenarios to us, the 1.6 versus the 1.9. What if they come back and say that the...
You're not going to hit that.
No, I am not going to hit that. I'm thinking about hitting my fingers. It would probably be less painful.
2 options with the school.
Yeah, the 2 options for the school. What happens if they only needed 1.6? And I mean, that's $300,000 that we're budgeting for, that's well on the way to a penny, right? So, and there's nobody other than there's a school board member here, but I don't think she's here in that capacity. I think that's a realistic question. Because is there a way of, and I'm not trying to sit here and chew and nickel and dime until we get there, but I think that's a real question that needs to be asked. And taking this a different direction, everybody in this room from the county side has been asked to cut, cut, cut. We haven't asked the schools to cut, right? They came into 1.9, we haven't asked them to do anything else. They presented two different models. What's wrong with us budgeting for 1.6 and finding another $100,000 to throw another penny off of the citizens? Is that a worthwhile discussion anybody wants to look at?
Well, penny is what,
405.
405?
405.
Well,
So I'm not trying to belabor this, Mr. Martin, but I think it needs to be, the discussion has to be had.
I don't take it as belaboring at all. I think it's good discussions and it's tough discussions. I mean, we can either go with their worst-case scenario that they gave us, or we can just tell them you're only getting 1.6. And that's all we can do this year, and that would drop it down to what, 57?
It gets close, but not quite.
Yeah.
But they're also basing their budget off of the worst-case scenario, which is the governor's budget. And if they come back and actually get a budget done in Richmond, and there's more money into it, is there anything that would prevent us from changing the 58 to a 57 if they get more funding from the state?
It
Or
really
does the
depe-
timeline not work?
It
Mr.
depends on,
Bryant?
yeah, it depends on timing. What, our plan is to adopt the tax rate May the 5th.
Yeah,
So
because the treasurer has to send out the notices about what
correct.
time.
Right, but they would
Correct.
know by May 5th.
the tax bills are issued on June the 1st, and they're due by July 1st.
Okay, so we don't have to adopt the tax rate until May 5th.
That'll be the official night. What we need from you is to tell us what tax rate to use to build a budget, because we have to advertise the budget in the paper. So we're asking you if you want us to if we build option C is based off of a 58 cents tax rate. And so right now at the workshop, we're asking you, is this the budget you want us to advertise, the option C budget? Which is built around a 58 cent tax rate.
So I know there hasn't been a motion on the floor yet, but Ms. Adams, that's very good stuff you brought up. So if, under our worst-case scenarios, if there's three of us that are saying move forward with the 58 cent to develop the budget, if we get additional information in where we could lower it a penny, then we could do that. But worst-case scenario would be 58 cent.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the public notice requires that we set a tax rate that's going to be discussed as part of the setting of the tax rate. And so all it's doing is setting a high bar.
But didn't we do that at 61
We
already?
did.
We
We
did.
advertised it at 61.
We did.
But until
But-
we actually
but-
adopted on May 5th.
Right.
Correct.
We could lower it.
You could
Couldn't
lower it.
increase it anymore, so we've gone from 61 to 58.
Right.
So we could go down a penny if things come back better, but we can't go up. So at least we're going in the right direction, I guess. And I'll also say this, if you guys remember, which I appreciate, when the staff brought us all of the needs, right, which was like 33 positions and all of this, which would have required a 71 cent tax rate. So there's been some things that were asked for that weren't delivered that are probably still needed at some point. So it's not like we're just funding whatever was asked for. There was a lot of discussions that's gone into this.
And I think the only other thing we probably ought to note, in case somebody's watching, Mr. Chairman, that hasn't heard it before, is that we started out in the hole
Correct.
by $2+ million. Is that correct, Ms. Morgan? So you take that into account, that's already 5 pennies we had to make up for just because of revenue shortages. So just for everybody in YouTube land, just where it's, that communication's out there for transparency.
And Mr. Chairman, I would also just reiterate, for the benefit of the public, what you're doing with this motion is instructing the county administrator to create a budget using 58 cents. It is not setting the tax rate. You will not set the tax rate until May.
Gotcha. All right, board, is there a motion to that effect?
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and make a motion to advertise with option C at the 58 with the disclaimer that we'll work until May the 5th to see if we can continue to lower it any further.
So just to clarify, you're directing the county administrator to develop a budget based around 58 cents.
Around 58 cents.
That we
And-
may lower if the opportunity is good.
That's correct. And again, I do believe that we need to have further discussions with the school system about that $300,000
Understood.
difference.
All right, boys, motion on the floor, Mr. Adams. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Hey.
Nay?
All right, motion passes 3-2. Is there anything else?
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion on the floor, Mr. Adams. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Stand adjourned till 7 PM. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Jim,